look like when the worlds of music and social justice intersect? That's the question that I look at on this podcast. It's called It's Giving, and it's hosted by me, Ingela Travers-Hayward. This week, it's giving Aja Monet, who, yes, is a musician, yes, is a Grammy-nominated poet, but most importantly, Aja is a community organizer, which basically means that for a long time, Aja has been working extremely hard to make this world a better place for a lot of people. She actually has this amazing TED Talk that she released back in 2019, where she talks about this very thing, how her art has helped with these social movements. I highly recommend it, although maybe listen to this podcast episode first and then go listen to her TED Talk. Have it be a nice little pairing. One of the most interesting parts of this conversation is the fact that Aja mentions that being politicized has kind of gone mainstream now. Back when she was doing this work, you couldn't talk about Palestine on the radio without having some sort of pushback. But now we are able to have these conversations. We are able to talk about this stuff. And so getting Aja's perspective on the then versus the now was extremely fascinating. So if this is your first time listening to the show, go ahead and follow, click subscribe. It is a huge momentum push, so I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I've got so many more artists coming up. There are a lot in the back catalog, and each one has a really unique point of view and a really unique cause that they care about. So enjoy this episode. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week. If you're ready, we will get going.
No worries. Just preparing you now. If I'm too long-winded, feel free to cut me off, okay?
I listen, my husband is the most long-winded person in the world, so I love a talker. So talk away. This is that makes my job easier. So yeah, basically the reason why I wanted to talk to you, I think, is because, this podcast is all about how music and, social good, social justice interact. And a lot of artists are passionate about sort of giving back and things like that. But I thought what was really cool with you is when I'm doing this research, not only are you described as a musician, as a poet, the word cultural organizer is always in there. Activist, I think, the language has changed, but now it's usually cultural organizer is always the words that define who you are. And so I'm just so curious, when did that begin? Like from the inception of your career, was it always just a case of art and social good go together, or where was that born out of?
Yeah, well, most of the time, thank you for that question and thank you for having me. I think most of the time, what the way that I've been trying to articulate when people write a bio is through as a cultural worker, and organizer is in there as well, of course. So I think cultural organizer might even be better.
Yeah.
But I know that a big part of my connection to the work that I do is that I recognize that culture is how we shape. Culture is like the air we breathe, right? And so a lot
Hmm.
of the things that come to be popularized or come to be sort of the values that we care about are shaped through our culture, which is our spiritual practices, our foods, our customs, some of the things that we all subscribe to and participate with. And so for me, like I've always been fascinated by those things. Like I fall in love with culture. I think culture is our spiritual expression out loud. It's the way that
Yeah.
we show gratitude to the planet and to each other and our relationships with one another. So I've always known that it plays a big role in the worlds that we subscribe to and the kind of the realities that we co-create together. I think when it comes to the artists that I love and what has always spoken like to my heart, what has always connected with me are artists that were speaking to the culture, speaking to
Okay.
the moment, reflecting the reality of the conditions we're dealing with. I think people talk about one of the things I resist with activists, and I always have from the very beginning,
Yeah.
people just put it on you because it's an easy title to put on someone that sort of delineates you from someone else, right? Like you don't take
Hmm.
it's a lack of. I think the title allows people to not take responsibility for their role as well in the world that we are co-creating together. And to
Yeah.
me, there are some people that do that work and they see something, they get outraged and they get active. And I think that's awesome. I think people get mobilized around actions and want to create actions that reflect the mobilization that we need to change the conditions we want to see. I think what's different is that my concerns are not with like just reacting or
Yeah.
acting out of a spontaneous moment. I see myself as a part of a continuum, a part of a lineage. I know that I'm a part of a cultural legacy. I know that I have, um, people who have come before me, people
Yeah.
will come after me, and I come to this moment, I come to now with the wisdom and the lessons that came from that.
Okay.
And so, with that being said, I don't know any poet that I loved or admired that didn't see themselves as a part of that continuum, that didn't have a spiritual, emotional, physical, intellectual, political relationship to the conditions of the world around them and the role that they played and the responsibility they felt towards that role, whether
Hmm.
that be in their interpersonal, intimate relationships with their loved ones and their partners or their children or their neighborhood, or their local community center. Like, people always recognize that like relationships were fundamental to how we connect and how we solve problems. And so I think that that's a big part of like most artists
Hmm.
that I've loved. They see
Yeah.
collaboration as an agent of change. They see the possibility in collaboration. When they see problems, they look for ways to be creative and collaborate with others to do that. And I
Yeah.
think what has happened in our society now, especially prior to this mainstream moment where genocide has been broadcasted on, across all of our platforms,
Hmm.
and I would say even earlier, there have been phases to this current moment where activism, or how people see activism and political education, political awareness, is more mainstream than it was when I was coming up.
Yeah.
Right. So we're seeing sort of people learn language that they may not have used prior. We've seen people fall in love with certain kind of rhetoric that
Yeah.
they're excited about because this is, it's like when you first get put onto something, you know what I mean? You're like, oh my God, like, do you know about this? And it's like, yes, I know about it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to
Uh,
the club. It's like when
yeah.
somebody, just learns about, like any little kid, when you're seeing them learn about like letters or apples or fruits and vegetables, and they're like, oh, banana, and everywhere they go, orange, and they're just so excited to
Yeah.
articulate what they've learned. I think what we're seeing too is a demonstration of a lot of people that have been awakened, have been mobilized into organization or into movement in some way, shape, or form, usually by their own personal experience, because the conditions are so harsh and such contradicting stakes right now, that I think it's a opportune moment to politicize a lot of folks. And so everyone's coming to this stark awareness that capitalism is strangling us, and so people realize, hey, there's a problem here. And rather than saying we all have a role, we all have a responsibility. Oh, you're an activist, so
Yeah.
because you care and you shout about it, or you talk about it, or you show up to an event. And for me, I think what I'm doing is a little bit more um implicated than that. I
Yeah.
think my role is less like, let me react. I think my role is like, I've organized for this moment. The moment we're seeing that's
Yeah.
becoming mainstream, we were there are people who came before me that were organizing for that moment, and I was part of that lineage and that continuum. So I see myself as, integral in recognizing that these moments where people get invited into political education take sometimes years and years and years of interpersonal, intimate, devotional, like, workshopping, and
Hmm.
collaboration and service, that goes unseen before it becomes something that everyone else sees.
Well, this I mean directly opens up something that I really wanted to talk to you about, because so I was watching the TED Talk that you did in 2020, that talks all about social movements and how they intersect, and one of the things that I was really curious about was, you talk about how you and a group of community, or a group of artists, a group of community organizers go to Palestine, and please correct me if I'm explaining this incorrectly, but you go to Palestine, you immerse yourself in the culture. And this is, I couldn't figure out what year it was, but obviously it's prior to 2020. I'm really curious how it felt for you, someone who evidently had known so much about what's going on in Palestine, had known about this long before 2023. What was it like when suddenly it became, again, I don't mean to sound flippant, but it became, or caring about what was happening in Gaza became mainstream? How did that feel for you?
I don't know that it's honestly, I don't, I'm still processing a lot of what
Yeah.
we're experiencing because we're still in it,
Yeah.
and there's still a genocide taking place, and people are still being slaughtered and murdered, and there has been no justice and no accountability, and
Yeah.
there no end to the devastation. And so I haven't spent a lot of time, you know, processing my thoughts. I think internally and interpersonally with my friends, we talk about sort of, a little bit like, wow, can you believe that we're here? That
Yeah.
everybody knows this. People are talking about it now. Thousands of people are showing up at protests. Artists are now, like when I first, because 2023 is when a lot of people got politicized.
Yeah.
There were specific cases or scenarios that went viral or went across the globe before that started to burst through sort of the zeitgeist and like
Yeah.
give people an understanding of what was taking place in Palestine and the horrendous conditions of Palestinian people. But for the most part, I remember when before we even went on our first delegation, you couldn't say the word Palestine on a radio station in an
Yeah.
interview or on a TV program. Like, you never
Yeah.
really heard it. People would you know um shut you down or deny that it even existed. um and there was a conscientious effort to keep the conversation around Palestine uh, at bay, to make it seem as if it was too complicated, too
Yeah.
difficult to understand, too that you were too naive to be able to fully understand the difficult, long history that got to this point where people were under an apartheid state.
Yeah.
Um, and so there was a lot of stigma around it when we first were organizing publicly, like becoming outspoken publicly and organizing for a public cultural shift.
Yeah.
And I think when you start to recognize that you are, you know, how do I say, disrupting a larger narrative or a major
Yeah.
a narrative that has millions and millions, if not billions of dollars invested in keeping it in power, keeping
Yeah.
it as the dominant narrative. I mean, you're up against a huge battle. And I think a lot of people thought that our delegations and the work that we were doing was insignificant, that
Hmm.
cultural work wasn't as important um, you know, as other forms of power. And so I think, you know, learning to see, bearing witness to people who are now seeing the brunt, like the residue of so much sacrifice. There's so many people that
Hmm.
came before me that have, sacrificed positions, sacrificed livelihoods, sacrificed relationships, um, for the sake of, the liberation of the Palestinian people and liberation of all people, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I think that what we are seeing, while it is encouraging in some ways, because now we are no longer alone and we no longer have to whisper about Palestine.
Hmm.
I think one of the questions is like, you know, what good is it, to be able to yell about Palestine when you can't put an end to the murder and the genocide? I think right now what I'm coming to grips with myself, not that me, one person, can change anything,
Yeah.
in terms of like the larger conditions that Palestinian people are facing, but we have tried to chip away as much as we can with every will and might that we have at um making it so that people, the reputation of Israel is in shambles, that people
Yeah.
question their allegiance to states and nation states, and people question their allegiance to the militarization of nation states. People are questioning their allegiance to, to even capitalism, to colonialism. So
Yeah.
we are Palestine is becoming a mobilizing force. It's becoming a way that so many people are seeking uh, liberation, seeking
Mhm.
connection, seeking solidarity. So Palestine is no longer just a place of land, um, and a geographic location or a nationality for a certain group of people limited to that geographic location. I think Palestine is a state of consciousness, of liberatory consciousness at
Yeah.
this juncture. What the cultural work has shown is that it is a way that people are starting to perceive and look at the world and see the world differently, and it's opening hearts, it's opening minds, and it's making people demand better and better out of one another, out of themselves, and out of the societies that they participate in. I think it's beginning to do that, but it's still, I'm grappling with it. I'm like
Yeah.
reaching for the words as I'm saying it to you, because I will one day sit back and be able to really process, but I don't know that I have fully words for all the things that I'm feeling. Most days I'm feeling a wide range of emotions, and
Yeah.
sometimes social media accelerates sort of the confrontation of those moments, or the complexity of those emotions, because we are in a state where a lot of people are crediting this moment and the awareness that is to come with at the hands of this very exploitative, like, technology. You know what I mean? but
Well,
but
yeah.
it's not just, it's people. That's the thing that I believe in. And I that's the thing that I it's the spirit of people that I think I try to maintain relationship to, and I try to lift up and remember, is that everyday ordinary people who have sacrificed so much, who have been killed, um these are the people I try to remember and reflect on, because yeah, it's hard to be at a state where everybody's aware, but it has not put a stop to what is happening. And it's really hard to not fall in. You have to be very conscientious to not fall into despair, and to continue to be creative and innovative about entry points to how we change the world, and to imagine other forms of power that maybe we have not credited as valuable or worthy.
Yeah, and I think, you also have spoken about in a past interview that I was reading about, it's not just about your intent, it's about the impact, and I think a lot about with this technology. Okay, maybe you have someone has good intentions, posting some photos of what's happening with ICE, what's happening in Palestine. But then it's like, and then what, and so I just spend a lot of time thinking about, are things like Instagram, is it actually helping when it comes to social movements today? I don't know. Do you think that it is?
I think that it started in that way.
Yeah.
I think that there are uh I think that inherently, no, it is not a problem. Like, it is, I'll say inherently, yes, it has the capacity to help people,
Yeah.
in the sense that we can connect across difference in a way that is, um, in a way where emergent, insurgent, like, consciousness is, like, more possible, because we see that difference is actually an entry point towards, is an opening, right,
Yeah.
of possibility, rather than um a need to kind of uh, dominate between each other. So I
Yeah.
think there's possibility in that function of technology and social media. It started in this really pure way. I
Yeah.
think capitalism, and what capitalism does to the spirit and to any sincere, genuine invention, right, is that it
Hmm.
takes it out of the function um of a liberatory, like, expressive capacity, and it makes it to where profit becomes the concern over people. And I
Yeah.
think anytime that that happens, you know, we have lost, we have lost the power. You know, we have
Yeah.
lost the will to create change, and so that's where we are. You know, that people are trying to exploit the goodwill of those who sought the possibility of what social media could do as a connector and as a force um of equalizing and like stabilizing our different, you know, across our differences, and creating and deeper profound connections. And I think all of that is not bad. I
Yeah.
just think
Yeah.
social media has been, it's just been abused, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're seeing that because we're seeing how Meta is being sued, you know, and these companies are being sued
Yeah.
for the very toxic exploitative like tactics that they've used around the algorithm to keep people stuck in the attention, and the attention economy has taken over, you
Yeah.
know. And so people are not being encouraged to be present with one another. They're just encouraged to move from distraction to distraction, and to
Yeah.
me that is concerning.
Is there, as an artist right now, is there an issue that you feel most passionate about trying to raise awareness for right now? You know, I know this world is has no shortage of atrocities that are happening right now, but is there one, yeah, in 2026 or you know, in this present day that you feel like you really want to make more people aware of?
Love, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think love is the most revolutionary, radical, like, tactic that we have. And in spite of everything, you know, when we focus on all the issues and all the ailments and all the problems, which granted, like, it's important to name and to know this is wrong. You know, these things are wrong. These
Yeah.
things need to be changed. But I think that when you don't allot for people to also recognize, like, what are we fighting for? What are the values that we're moving from?
Yeah.
Then people don't know where to go or what to do with all of the energy that they feel towards the hurt and the pain or the frustration or the suffering. And um you know, you don't need a genocide to have to suffer, you
Yeah.
know. The human experience, we come into this planet, you know, crying, you know,
Yeah.
and out of that we come to learn through being held and being lulled to sleep, you know. And we come to learn what care and nurturing looks like, and someone feeding
Mhm.
us and someone looking after us and someone showing us models of what life could look like when you're looked after. So I think the root of it comes to a place of like, well, what does love look like in action? What does
Yeah.
love look like out loud? I think a lot of this is deeply rooted in a spiritual, you know, comes from a deep spiritual place and a lack of connection to spirit. So for me, that is where everything roots from. You know,
Yeah.
it's an issue that concerns me. I don't think that people like to talk about stuff from that place because many people think that they're above spirit, but behind every action there's a spirit.
Mhm.
So I think until we can contend with that, that there are so many things seen and unseen that are taking place. Um, there are other dimensions of reality that we are existing at within. Then I don't think we can really grapple with what's at hand and all the other things that are going on. You know. So yeah, I think once we can get right with spirit, a lot of this stuff will be solved. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of these issues that we have will be solved. I think that's what the surrealists really, what I loved about surrealism in its response to fascism and its response to some of the horrendous conditions that we've seen take place, is that it's offering alternate reality, you know, alternate way of perceiving and entering this coexistence and this collaboration together. And
Yeah.
that's cool to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is not a that is more uh you know, look at all of, I hate to say this because I don't want it to bite me in the butt like later on, but like
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the footage of seeing what's taking place in uh, New York around the Knicks parade,
Yeah.
and then seeing these different other mobilizations of marches, on Washington, or marches that have come together around injustice or protests that people have done. And I'm seeing, like, what is the energy that's taking place, and what is the energy that people have within them, that they're begging to express
Yeah.
among each other and connecting to each other. And clearly, like, at the core of it, a lot of these gatherings, it's so much possibility of what energy can be used towards, how we can harness energy. And a lot of what our energy has been used in the last recent years is around harnessing towards what is going wrong, what
Yeah.
is the issue.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so there has been little to no examples of people that are able to bring folks across issues, across concerns, to see their common, you know uh spiritness, their common presence with one another. And we had examples of that. Art was one of the few places where people could do that. I think art and sports, you see someone like Bob Marley, the reason why he became so dangerous was because the music was raising the vibration in such a way that people were gathering on one accord across difference to see their bettering, their possibility for bettering, their ability to demand more. And then you see people in New York City across the streets, like, praising sanitation workers,
Mhm.
praising, like, cheering on, mailmen, like they're the celebrities. I'd
Yeah.
never seen that before.
Yeah.
I've never seen that in my entire life. So something about that, to me, is a cause worth fighting for. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to capture that and put it in a bottle and say, "Hey, take a sip of this. This is what we need to be doing."
Yeah.
But something in that feels like it's a direction that we need to explore, you
Do
know?
you think, it's interesting you bring up Bob Marley. Do you think that music specifically can ever get back to a place that has that same sort of spirit, I guess? That music, do you feel like music today is as political as it once was, or can it return to it being as political as it once was?
Yeah, I think I don't think you have a choice in whether or not music is political,
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a matter of, like, is music more political then, or is now more political. I think music is inherently, like, we are an expression of the values of how we see, where resources should be distributed. Like,
Yeah.
we in real time, you having this conversation with me, us walking down the street, us dancing, us going to a party, like, all of these things, if you look into it deeply, if you offer a lens, or you come to it with a certain angle that asks certain kinds of questions, then you can start to see what the values are, what the
Hmm.
political expressions of those values are. So, to me, all art is political. All art
Yeah.
has some, it's taking some kind of stance, even if it's not one that I necessarily agree with,
Yeah.
or that one that I feel like, um, is where we want to be.
Yeah.
But I think that all art is doing that. And I think some artists now are more, I'll say this, there is more artists trying to, because they recognize the culture has shifted in such a way that the people are demanding more out of
Hmm.
their music, out of their leadership, out of their cultural spaces, institutions. People want to see a more equitable, you know, coexistence with one another. And so now you're seeing people have to bend their will to the change
Yeah.
of the people.
Hmm.
But that was always what we said. If you shift the culture to a way, then, like, the people will follow, and everything
Yeah.
after that has to follow, because it becomes uncool to be when you make it uncool to be a billionaire or trillionaire, like, you have made it so that the people will not will demand something else, right? And so then they can dream and imagine something else. And the music and the art that's created of that will reflect something else. And the things that will be lifted up will reflect something else. But there were always artists talking about another world, another way. than
Yeah.
the mainstream commercial capital colonial way, you know? I think most artists come from that place because most artists come to art not because they're trying to be billionaires, you know?
Yeah.
I don't
I
know any artists that start with trying, they don't come to their art form because they're trying to exploit,
no.
you know?
No. I just have to say this is making me feel very hopeful, and I think like in right now, that's a feeling that is not too common. So yeah, and I think it leads me to sort of my final question for you, which is, yeah, for that person that is sitting at home listening to this, and is feeling a sense of helplessness, of, I want to try and do something. I want to try and make some sort of small difference, or yeah, just feel less alone or less hopeless. What advice would you have for someone like that?
Hmm. Well, the first thing I'd say, it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
That is not abnormal, you
Yeah.
know? Feeling that way shows that you are a sentient being that is connected to your heart. And I think you must search your heart for the things that reflect the courage that is demanded of now. You know, you
Yeah.
must know, like, for yourself, what is it that you gravitate towards? What are the things that feed you, that make you feel whole? Gravitate towards that. Gravitate towards the relationships that honor your being and
Yeah.
your sense of wellness and your sense of participation. You know, gravitate towards the communities that make you feel invited to participate, and find somewhere that, even if it's one other person that you can be of service to, you know, that you can share a skill that you have that no one else can share with them,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think once you, whether that be cooking, whether that be writing, whether that be painting, whether that be hair braiding, whether that be, dancing, whether that be bike riding, whatever it is, whatever thing that you do that calls you out of your head into your
Yeah.
heart, follow that. Follow the thing in your heart that makes your heart race with excitement, with joy, and follow what comes to you with ease, you know.
Yeah.
And when you can do that uh consistently, when you can do that with, um how do I say this, with devotion,
Yeah.
then then sit around a little bit and wait and receive what comes of that, because I promise something will come of it, you know. Follow that, and I think you will be on your way to wherever you're supposed to be, follow your purpose in that vein, in that path. But I think being of service is always a great way to get out of your head,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get, if I would say, turn the phone off, turn the devices off, go into nature. If we're talking like real immediate, go kiss some soil. Um, but just know that you're not crazy. You're
Yeah.
not alone. You're not you're not wrong. Wrong is not your name. You are a feeling sentient being, and by virtue of that, do what calls to your heart. Follow your heart and be courageous and take the risks that demands. You know what I mean? But every person is different, so I don't want to be prescriptive.
Yeah.
But I will say, embody the love that you deserve. That's the best thing I can say.